كتاب الله لا شيء سوى يهذبنا العمل به كتاب الله لا شيء سوى يهذبنا هذا القرآن يوحدنا لطريق الخير يوجهنا الله تعالى أنزله ورسول الله معلمنا رسول الله معلمنا.
If you're sacrificing accuracy for the sake of understanding, what you really mean is you want people to understand something in particular, so you're a little less accurate to make sure they understand what you had in mind. That accuracy, the facts are your opponent. Maybe I'll come back to this in a moment. It relates to a number of interesting stories. The Quranic reply as well to maybe the fundamental challenge these days is, of course, when they say such and such, let them bring their evidence. A challenge that's going on now, it's been announced as such, is that in particular a missionary group in South Africa, but in cooperation with missionary groups all over the world, have pointed out what we have to do is convince Muslims that the Quran is no more valuable than the Bible. It's interesting how they put it, because what they're saying is it's to be admitted that the Bible is a human document, that it contains error and so on. Now we have to convince Muslims the Quran is the same. I don't know why that should make Muslims into Christians, but at least what they're trying to say is that we have to show them their book is no better than ours, because that has been what the Muslims tried to accentuate. You have these difficulties, I don't have those difficulties. So they're determined to show them. And it doesn't work very well, of course, but this is what they're busy trying to do. Somebody, at a lecture I had given in Minnesota some months ago, he kept corresponding with me, and I was pointing out these difficulties in his sources. And finally he offered, by way of excuse, I guess, he said, look, I've got a book that gives me a lot of mistakes in the Quran. Suppose I showed them to you. Wouldn't you do the same as I do? You'd stick to your religion anyway? Well, no, what would you do if you saw mistakes in the Quran? You point out mistakes to me in the Bible and I stay in my religion. Suppose I showed you these. And he claims he has a book full of them. So I wrote him back to try to show the difference in attitude between us. I said, when you show me an error in the Quran, I will go on a tour and give it a lot of publicity. Encourage him. He can make the arrangements. I'll go from city to city and tell everybody, because I care about true and false. I don't excuse it. So then I suggested to him, I said, you pick the error of your choice, pick your favorite one, and send it to me. I said, then I will show you, God willing, the kind of scholarship of the people who write these books that you have. So what did he show me? He wrote me that the error is here, where it says in the Bible that Zechariah couldn't speak for 9 months, but the Quran says he couldn't speak for 3 days. Well, that's not really an error, of course. What he means is his book says this and my book says that. What I asked for was an error. If he had proof that Zechariah couldn't speak for 9 months, I'd be in trouble, yes. But his book says that, my book says something else. What I wrote him back was, in fact, to point out that problem, that this isn't what I asked for, but moreover that his story doesn't make sense anyway. It's self-contradictory. The Bible tells us Zechariah was a man who had no fault, never did a wrong thing, and yet one day the angel appears to him in the temple, where only the high priest can go. He tells him a word, and Zechariah thinks that's not an angel, that's the devil. I don't believe that. It doesn't fit in with what we know about Zechariah till then. And so on, just to try to point that out to him. But you see, he hasn't shown me something to disagree on. See, they're in a position of, they tell you, if the Quran is not a revelation, then it is a deception. Either the prophet was deceived or he himself deceived people. He was a deceiver or a dupe. In either case, the Quran is a deception. It is a lie. And the Muslim wants to insist, if it is a lie, show me a lie. What does it say that you know is wrong? and bring the proof. If you read me this thing, if you tell me, for example, the other example I gave this afternoon was the Bible tells us when Solomon, Suleiman, was an old man, he worshipped idols. According to the Bible, the Quran says it's not so. That again is a disagreement. Are they going to bring me proof that what I said is incorrect? I can bring them a lot of indications that they're incorrect. There are archaeologists who will tell you in the Encyclopedia Biblica that there was no idol worship in the time of Solomon. So, to kind of sum up so far, what the non-Muslim offers us when we are on the defensive is challenges or suggestions, which are, in one case, unworthy. That is, they are cheap. Everybody deserves better than that. They're old arguments which have been answered a long time ago. Or they are ill-formed ideas. That is, he said something, he hasn't really thought about what he's saying. When he says something like, you people don't know God, you want to ask him, in what sense don't I know him? I have more names for him than you have, I suppose. I would be the first thing I'd say. They know God is, what? Holy and loving and happy is about the only attributes I can think of in the Bible. Or they bring us suggestions that are ungrounded. That is, to say, oh, you people have taken your beliefs from mythology or whatever, and yet they can't give an example of that. Or they've given us replies that have no application. That's the kind of thing where somebody says logic has its limits, and you want to say, have you applied that principle and showed me where I stepped over the limit? No, he didn't think about that. While on the other hand, what has the Muslim done? Well, he has tried to point out to people that, number one, you have abandoned the methods that bring you success in every other field in your life. Anything else you do in life, when you find something is an impossibility, you start over. You know you made a mistake when you find confusion. Because you prefer the confusion, you have given up the faculty of reasoning. As one of the traditions says, the best thing God ever gave man was his reasoning ability. Instead, you have exercised only your preference. You take what you choose, not what you have a reason to take. It's what you prefer. We have tried to point out that people have lowered their standards. That is, they have smoothed out the obstacles. The natural obstacles, the things that would cause trouble anywhere else. You read the Bible account of the events leading up to the crucifixion of Jesus. It tells us that the man who betrayed him went off and discussed with the high priests, how much will you pay me to betray him? It reports the conversation. They settled on 30 pieces of silver. How did that get in the Bible? Who told the Bible writer this? Judas or the high priest? Who said, oh, by the way, we had a talk, we decided on 30 pieces of silver? Or as you read a little later on, it's reported Jesus told his disciples to stay where they were, and it says he went a long distance away. They fell asleep, and then he prayed, and he said these words. Who heard the words? They wrote this down. If that was any other book of history, you'd read that and you'd say, how did this get here? The man doesn't say who gave him this. In particular, he does not say God gave me this. One writer says, I just tried to trace these things with accuracy. But in any history, we insist on knowing when somebody says something, where did you get that? Or it doesn't qualify as history. And the last point that I mentioned was that people fail to specify their excuse. That is, those who would say, your book has lied, and you say, which lie? And he can't tell you specifically. He has only an opinion, but he hasn't supplied the detail. Now, Muslims are challenged. That's maybe what people are more interested in. For the last 7 years, I've had the privilege of being challenged. I enjoy the exercise. There's a little book called 90 Difficult Questions for Muslims.